Have you ever met someone who always seems to stay 10 moves ahead? Someone who never raises their voice, never appears desperate, and somehow walks away with exactly what they wanted, while everyone else is left wondering, what just happened? Most people mistake this for luck. Others call it charisma. But neither explanation is correct. It's something far more dangerous and far more powerful. It is Machiavellian intelligence. Not cruelty, not manipulation for the sake of manipulation, but the rare ability to understand human nature without illusions, and to use that understanding strategically. The strange part is that people who possess this kind of intelligence often don't look powerful at all. They're usually the quietest person in the room, the least emotional, the hardest to read. Today we're exploring 7 unmistakable signs of Machiavellian intelligence. Some of these traits can make a person highly respected. Others can make them deeply intimidating. And the 7th sign is the one that surprises almost everyone because it looks like weakness on the surface, when in reality it's one of the greatest sources of psychological power. Let's begin. Sign 1. They see people as they are, not as they pretend to be. Most people believe words. Machiavellian minds believe patterns. Someone says they're loyal. Interesting. Have they remained loyal when loyalty became expensive? Someone claims they're honest. Have they stayed honest when lying would have benefited them? Words cost almost nothing. Behavior is expensive. That's why intelligent strategists quietly collect evidence instead of accepting appearances. They understand something most people never do. Every person has a public identity and a private operating system. The public identity is designed for approval. The operating system reveals itself only under pressure. Watch someone after they lose. Watch them when they gain unexpected power. Watch how they treat people who cannot benefit them. Pressure removes masks. Power removes masks even faster. Machiavelli observed that people often change when circumstances change, not because they became different, but because they finally had permission to reveal who they already were. A Stoic would agree with one important addition. Don't become cynical, become observant. There's a difference. Cynics assume everyone is bad. Strategists simply assume everyone is human. That means strengths, weaknesses, vanity, fear, ambition, jealousy, hope. Every decision leaves clues. This isn't about judging people. It's about understanding reality before reality surprises you. The average person listens. The Machiavellian observer studies. And those two habits produce completely different lives. Sign 2. They rarely react emotionally. Here's something you'll notice about highly strategic people. They don't give immediate reactions, not because they don't feel emotions, because they understand the price of revealing them too quickly. Most conflicts are won before the argument even begins. Imagine someone insults you publicly. Most people respond instantly. Their pride demands it. Their emotions take control. But every emotional reaction gives away information. What hurts you? What threatens you? What makes you insecure? It's intelligence handed freely to your opponent. A Machiavellian thinker understands that silence creates uncertainty. The less people know about your emotional state, the harder you become to predict. This is where Stoicism becomes incredibly valuable. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself repeatedly that events themselves are neutral. Only our judgments disturb us. That doesn't mean becoming emotionless. It means refusing to become emotionally owned. There is enormous psychological strength in remaining composed while everyone else loses control. Think about negotiations. Think about business. Think about relationships. The calmer person often directs the outcome. Not because he speaks more, because he reacts less. Silence has a strange effect. People begin filling it themselves. They explain too much, reveal too much, confess too much. Meanwhile, the observer simply listens. One gathers information, the other leaks it. Guess which one usually wins? Sign 3. They understand that perception often matters more than truth. This may be the most uncomfortable lesson Machiavelli ever taught. Human beings don't respond to reality. They respond to what they believe reality is. That difference changes everything. History is filled with leaders who understood this principle. They knew that reputation often arrives before facts. First impressions shape opportunities. Confidence influences trust. Appearance influences authority. Is this fair? Not necessarily, but denying reality doesn't change it. Strategic people know that perception creates momentum. That doesn't mean living dishonestly. It means recognizing that your actions communicate long before your words do. Your posture, your timing, your consistency, your reliability, your ability to stay calm during chaos. People build stories about you constantly. The question isn't whether they will judge you. The question is whether you're intentionally shaping the reputation your actions create. Stoicism adds an important warning here. Never become a slave to public opinion. Control your character first. Your reputation should grow naturally from disciplined behavior, not from desperate performance. Ironically, the men who chase approval usually lose respect. The men who pursue competence often gain influence without asking for it. That's the paradox. Real authority is rarely announced. It's recognized. And once people begin associating your name with reliability, discipline, and emotional control, half the battle is already over. Before you've spoken a single word. Sign 4. They play the long game. Patience is one of the rarest forms of intelligence. Most people want immediate results, immediate revenge, immediate recognition, immediate success. They confuse speed with progress. But the Machiavellian mind understands something that many people spend decades learning. The person who controls time often controls the outcome. Watch an experienced chess player. He isn't obsessed with winning the next move. He's thinking about the position 10 moves from now. Every decision serves a larger objective. Life works much the same way. The impulsive man spends money to impress strangers. The strategic man invests quietly while others seek applause. The impulsive employee argues with his boss over every slight. The strategic employee waits, builds leverage, gains new skills, and leaves when the timing benefits him most. One satisfies emotion, the other serves purpose. Machiavelli understood that power is rarely taken in a single dramatic moment. More often, it is accumulated through countless small decisions that seem insignificant on their own. A reputation for reliability, a network of useful relationships, knowledge others overlook, the discipline to remain consistent while everyone else chases shortcuts. This is where Stoicism quietly strengthens strategy. The Stoics believe that many worthwhile things require endurance. They encourage people to focus on what they could control, their actions, their judgments, and their persistence, rather than demanding immediate rewards. The modern world encourages urgency, notifications, breaking news, instant gratification. But urgency often clouds judgment. Strategic men know when to move quickly. They also know when waiting creates a greater advantage than action ever could. Sometimes doing nothing isn't hesitation, it's positioning. And there is a profound difference between the two. Ask yourself this: how many opportunities have been lost because someone couldn't tolerate waiting one more week, one more month, one more year? The strongest oak doesn't grow overnight, neither does influence. Sign 5. They speak less than they know. There is an old saying, the fish that opens its mouth gets caught. Whether or not it's ancient wisdom hardly matters. The principle is timeless. Most people speak to prove they are intelligent. Machiavellian thinkers speak to accomplish something. Every unnecessary sentence creates risk. The more you explain, the more people discover your intentions, your fears, your priorities, even your weaknesses. Many people mistake constant talking for confidence. In reality, it is often the opposite. Confident people rarely feel the need to advertise themselves. They let results carry the conversation. Notice what happens during meetings. One person dominates the discussion, another quietly observes. Hours later, the quieter individual asks one carefully chosen question that changes the direction of the entire conversation. That isn't coincidence, that's discipline. Words are like currency. Spend them carelessly and they lose value. Spend them deliberately and people begin listening more closely each time you speak. Machiavelli recognized that uncertainty can be a strategic advantage. If people always know exactly what you're thinking, they can predict you. If they can predict you, they can prepare for you. Predictability is comfortable. It is rarely powerful. The Stoics practiced restraint for a different reason. They believed that wise speech begins with wise listening. Before speaking, they asked themselves, is this true? Is it necessary? Does it improve the situation? Imagine how different most conversations would become if people asked themselves those questions before every response. Silence also has another effect. It invites revelation. People naturally dislike empty space in conversation. Given enough silence, many begin explaining themselves. They volunteer information. They justify decisions that no one questioned. Sometimes they expose motives they intended to hide. The strategic listener doesn't interrupt this process. He watches, he remembers, he learns. And because he isn't busy trying to impress everyone, he often notices what everyone else completely misses. Sign 6. They understand that everyone has a price, but it isn't always money. This is where many people misunderstand Machiavelli. When they hear the word price, they immediately think of wealth. But human motivation is rarely that simple. Some people crave status more than money. Others seek certainty. Some desperately need recognition. Others want belonging. Others fear rejection so intensely that they will abandon their own principles simply to avoid standing alone. Money motivates many. Emotion motivates almost everyone. Strategic thinkers pay close attention to these invisible currencies, not to exploit people unnecessarily, but because understanding motivation makes behavior easier to understand. Consider two employees. One works tirelessly for a larger paycheck. The other works just as hard because he wants public recognition from his manager. Offer each person the wrong reward, and you'll wonder why neither is satisfied. Offer the right one, and everything changes. The same principle applies far beyond the workplace, in friendships, business partnerships, politics, negotiations, relationships. Every person is pursuing something: security, respect, freedom, power, purpose, love, or perhaps simply the feeling of being seen. Most conflict begins when we assume everyone values the same things we do. The Machiavellian observer never makes that mistake. He watches what people repeatedly sacrifice for, because sacrifice reveals priorities far more honestly than promises ever will. But here, Stoicism provides an essential boundary. Understanding another person's motivations does not obligate you to manipulate them. Knowledge creates responsibility, not just opportunity. The Stoic ideal is to remain governed by your own character, even when you understand how influence works. That distinction matters. Without self-control, strategic thinking can become mere manipulation. Without strategic thinking, virtue can become naivete. The strongest man combines both. He understands human nature, yet refuses to become ruled by greed, anger, or vanity himself. That combination is exceptionally rare, and because it is rare, it is difficult to deceive. Sign 7. They are their own hardest person to deceive. Here is the truth that most people never expect. The greatest Machiavellian advantage is not the ability to manipulate others. It is the ability to recognize when you are manipulating yourself. Most men believe they are rational, but in reality, they spend much of their lives defending decisions they made emotionally. They call it confidence. Sometimes it's pride. They call it loyalty. Sometimes it's fear of change. They call it patience. Sometimes it's simply the fear of failure. The most dangerous lies are not the ones told by other people. They're the ones we repeat to ourselves. I'm staying because things will improve. I'll start next month. I don't really care what people think. I have everything under control. Maybe, but maybe those are stories created to avoid an uncomfortable truth. This is why genuine strategists spend as much time examining themselves as they do observing everyone else. Because they know one undeniable fact: if you don't understand your own weaknesses, someone else eventually will. Machiavelli repeatedly emphasized that fortune favors those who prepare before circumstances force them to react. Preparation begins with honesty, not the comforting kind, the uncomfortable kind, the kind that forces a man to admit, "I was wrong. I let my ego make that decision. I trusted someone because I wanted to believe them. I ignored the warning signs because accepting reality would have been painful." That level of honesty is rare. Most people defend their identity. Strategic people update it. They are willing to abandon old beliefs when new evidence appears. Not because they are weak, because reality is more valuable than pride. This is where Stoicism reaches its highest point. Marcus Aurelius filled his private journal with reminders, not about conquering nations, but about conquering himself. He constantly questioned his motives, his impulses, his anger, his vanity. Imagine that, the most powerful man in the Roman Empire reminding himself every day not to become arrogant. That is not weakness, that is discipline. Because the man who can govern himself becomes remarkably difficult to manipulate. Insults lose their power. Flattery loses its power. Fear loses much of its power. Even success becomes less dangerous because it no longer blinds him. He understands his own ambitions, but he refuses to become their prisoner. And that is the final sign of Machiavellian intelligence. Not perfect control over other people, but relentless awareness of yourself. Ironically, once you master that, you rarely need to manipulate anyone at all. People naturally trust those who remain calm. They naturally follow those who are consistent. They naturally respect those who cannot be easily shaken. The greatest strategy is often becoming the kind of man whose character speaks before he does. Now notice something interesting. None of these qualities depend on physical strength. None require extraordinary talent. None are reserved for the wealthy, the famous, or the powerful. They begin with observation. They grow through discipline, and they mature through experience. The world often celebrates loud personalities. Social media rewards instant opinions. Modern culture encourages constant reaction. But history tells a different story. Again and again, the men who shaped events were often those who understood when to remain silent, when to wait, when to observe, and when to act with absolute conviction. That doesn't mean becoming cold. It doesn't mean treating every relationship like a game. And it certainly doesn't mean abandoning your principles. Strategy without character eventually destroys itself. Character without strategy is easily exploited. The strongest man develops both. He understands power without becoming obsessed by it. He understands influence without losing his integrity. He studies human nature, beginning with his own. Because in the end, the greatest victory isn't controlling other people. It's reaching a point where your emotions no longer control you, where your ego no longer blinds you, or your decisions are guided by clear judgment instead of impulse. That kind of discipline is quiet, invisible, and increasingly rare. Perhaps that's why it has always been so powerful. So here's a question for you. Which of these 7 signs do you believe is the hardest to develop? And which one do you recognize most in yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely like to read your perspective and see how different people view these ideas. If you enjoyed this video and want more content exploring Machiavellian strategy, Stoicism, psychology, and timeless lessons on mastering yourself in a chaotic world, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And remember, the greatest battle you'll ever fight isn't against another person. It's against the parts of yourself that stand between you and the man you're capable of becoming. Thank you.